let's get tons and tons of resin. I'm your host, Ledoux. In this video, we're going to build a multi-creaking farm. This design is fully AFK, doesn't use any potions, and can have up to 12 creaking at once. You could always build more of these in the area if you want even more. But a single 12 creaking version will get almost an entire double chest of resin every single night. Before we jump into the build tutorial, we need to discuss how the creaking spawns. So it can spawn up to 16 blocks horizontally from a heart, or up to 8 blocks above and below the heart. So in the 17 by 33 area from each heart, there needs to be nothing else that the creaking can spawn on. This includes other creaking farms. And normal spawn proofing rules apply. The creaking can't spawn on stuff like glass. But this also means that we need to build it at least 8 blocks above the ground if we want to avoid spawn proofing. But I would actually recommend building it more than 40 blocks above the ground so that if a creaking happens to fall off, it will immediately respawn up in the farm. You can also build this anywhere that you want to. You can build it in ocean, over land. There is no specific biome requirement for this farm. And again, the height is totally up to you and how much you want to spawn proof, but just to play it safe, I'm going to go up by 50 blocks and start building up here. Just make sure that there is no spawnable area within about 30 blocks of this location. But we're going to start off by placing down a double chest, and remember that this farm will produce about a double chest per night. So you'll probably want to expand this in some way, maybe add a smelting system. All of that will be totally up to you. But we're going to place 2 hoppers pointed into the back of this chest, and then go back by 3 glass blocks from these hoppers. And this does need to be glass so that the creaking cannot spawn on it. Then place 2 glass above that chest, and then we can place solid blocks next to that glass, then 4 glass going back, and then 4 blocks here on the back. Now the glass does need to be glass, but the solid blocks could also be glass. I'm just trying to save you a little bit of materials. So this is what you should have. And again, the solid blocks could be glass if you want to. It's up to you. Just you need to use glass where there is glass. But now we need to go back by 7 more glass on each side so that we will be left with 2 4-wide rows that are 8 long. Like 2 wings sticking out, 1 on each side, that is 8 by 4. Now we can just surround the entire thing diagonally up with a row of solid blocks or glass. Again, the solid blocks are irrelevant. I'm just trying to save you some materials. Now let's make sure that we built everything at the correct length by placing in the water. So on each of the far sides, we need water sources along the outermost wall, and the water should flow directly up to the center canal and stop. Then we will also need 2 water buckets here in the back on the opposite side from the hoppers so that it's flowing toward the hoppers. Now on top of these middle 2 blocks, we need to go out each direction by 6. So 6 blocks from the center going that way, and 6 blocks from the center going the other direction. Then on top of all of the other blocks, we need to place glass to prevent creakings from spawning and to contain the resin that gets dropped by the farm. And if you're using scaffolding to get in and out of the farm, we can just raise that up to this level. We won't be building any taller than this. Now we need to place in the logs and the hearts. So this will really depend on how many hearts you want to use. If you want the max size 12 heart version, just continue following along. But if you want less hearts, place in less logs and switch some of these solid blocks for glass so there are no open solid blocks. But then place in your hearts on top of the logs, place more logs on top of those hearts, and make sure that all of the logs and hearts are facing the same direction. If any of it's facing a different direction, the heart won't activate. So as long as your hearts are orange, you're good to go. Now I might also recommend waiting to place in the hearts so that creakings don't spawn and torment you while you're trying to build. But that's totally up to you. The hearts will just go right here, like so. Then we need to cover this entire front side with logs. And these logs can be facing in any direction. Resin doesn't care which direction the logs are facing, so they can be facing in any orientation. Then on the left side, diagonally down from the logs, we need to place a temporary block so that we can place 3 pistons that are holding these logs. So 3 pistons that are facing the logs, like so. Then on the right side, we need to do the same thing, but we need to go out an additional block so that there is 1 block of air in between the front row of logs and these 3 pistons, like so. So a 1 block gap over here on the right side. And some of this might be a little awkward to build in survival, so be sure to bring some scaffolding or some trash blocks. But either way, we need to place a solid block behind the middlemost piston, then another solid block diagonally down from that. Place a comparator and 2 dust on these blocks, like so, on each side. So comparator on the backmost block, and then 2 dust, 1 on the bottom and top. Then place a copper bulb behind that comparator. So the comparator is reading from the copper bulb and sending power into the block with dust on it. And then we're going to build a little glass walkway down here on the back. So you should be able to walk directly under the bulbs on this little glass pathway. Oh, and the oxidation level of the bulbs does not matter at all. That doesn't affect redstone whatsoever. But then somewhere in the middle, it doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, we're going to build a Y shape out of 4 blocks like so. Then on top of the middle block, place a repeater on a max delay pointed toward the back, then a piece of dust on top of the bottommost block, and a redstone torch on the front side of the middle one, and it should start turning on and off. So then place a lever on any of the sides of the block that has the dust on it, and turn that lever on to turn off the clock. That lever will be the on-off switch for the farm. But then we need a slab on top of that block, and then slabs on top of all of these logs. These will block the creaking from spawning up here. Then we need another slab on top of each piston, like so. Oh, and we also need a slab in that hole between the piston and the logs, because occasionally we will have logs there. And just ignore all of the other stuff that you see. We just need slabs on top of all of the logs and pistons and on top of that hole. We also need a button on the side of this block right here next to that heart to prevent resin from growing on the back of the frontmost log. So just place that slab in that button, and now we'll continue on. Next up, we need to place a button on top of one of the bulbs, and then press that button to turn that bulb on. We also need a button on top of the other bulb, but don't press this button. The buttons will block the spawns, but we want the bulbs to be opposite from each other. So one will be on and one will be off. Then next to this backmost block, we need to place more solid blocks going off in each direction so that they are aligned with the hearts. So if you're using less hearts, this row will be shorter. It just needs to be aligned with all of the hearts. But then place dust on top of those blocks and pistons facing toward the back behind all of those blocks, with slabs on top to prevent spawns, like so. Now we need to place a temporary block in front of the pistons, and then a piece of glass next to that temporary block, so that they are 1 block away from the pistons. Then carry this all the way over so it's all aligned with the hearts, and so there should be 1 block of air in between the pistons and the glass, like so. Now in survival, one way to make all of this easier is aligned with one of the sidemost pistons. We're going to just bridge out to give us some room to work with. We're going to build the spawning platform back there out of solid blocks anyway. But for now, we need 3 glass underneath the hole in front of the pistons. So 3 glass right there, and we don't want any solid blocks on that side. And then on this side, we're going to carry this wall of glass all the way over to be aligned with the rest of the pistons. And then same way with these solid blocks down here. So I guess you should start off with the solid blocks to give you something to stand on. But then from these solid blocks, we need to go back 7 more solid blocks, so that we're going to be left with an 8 long solid block platform back here that is aligned with the number of hearts that you have. So if you have 12 hearts, this will be 12 by 8. But either way, we need this 3 block tall wall of glass here in the front, then your platform, then this floating row of glass up there, 1 block from the pistons. Now diagonally up from the solid block platform, we need an outer row of solid blocks. Then to make sure all of this is at the correct length, let's go ahead and place water along the back. So if there's a water source along the entire back row, and it should flow right up to that glass wall. Then place glass on top of these blocks to prevent spawns and to prevent the creaking from jumping out of the spawning platform. So when you're done, this is what you should have. And these bottommost solid blocks could technically be glass if you wanted to, but you just need a 2 tall wall around the spawning platform, like so. Now we're going to jump up here, and we need a trident for every piston. So throw in a trident in front of every piston, just, 1 trident per piston, which is 1 trident per heart. Now, when you turn on the clock, the piston should activate, and you should hear the tridents getting hit by the pistons. It should be going clink, 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 and the tridents should be moving. And we are almost totally done. All that's left is to connect the bulbs. So on the side that has a 1 block gap between the rows and the bulb, go diagonally down with a block, place a torch on it, then dust on top. Then on the other side, where the bulb is closer to the rows, just place a torch on the side of the row, and place a block diagonally down from the bulb under the torch with dust on top. And both of the bulbs should activate when you place the torch and dust. So they should still be opposite from each other, but they will have each toggled. Now go through, especially if you used blocks to help you build, and make sure that everything is spawn-proofed. Everything except for the spawning platform should either be glass or have a redstone component or a slab on top. But if you're playing on multiplayer, go ahead and break out these 6 slabs, place a daylight sensor, and then 5 dust. 5 dust going from the daylight sensor to the block next to the repeater. And what this will do is turn the farm off during the day. Since there's no point in this farm running during the day, we can just add that daylight sensor to help cut down on lag. It's always nice to be aware of your impact on the lag for multiplayer servers. But even with that daylight sensor, be sure to continue to use the lever to turn the farm on and off. Don't just leave the farm on and let the daylight sensor do its job, because this is using a Trident killer, so we still need to turn this off before we leave the area. And we are now totally done, except that I forgot one more thing, and that is that we need to place 2 buttons here on the front, 1 block above each of these hoppers. Hoppers are not spawn-proofed, so creaking can spawn on top of these hoppers, but if we just place a button 1 block above them, that will block the spawns without blocking the water. And now we are totally and completely done. It's also worth mentioning that creaking don't care about light, so be sure to spam a bunch of torches up here, not only to prevent spawns, but also to prevent lighting updates. Since this is using bulbs that are turning on and off, you definitely want to cut down on lighting updates and prevent mobs from spawning up here as well. Now when it comes to using this farm, there are actually a few things that we can do to improve the rates. But at the bare minimum, if you turn off the lever, it will turn on the farm. If you have the daylight sensor attached, the farm won't actually activate until it's dark enough. Once it's late enough for creaking to spawn, they will get pushed by the water into the Trident killers and start growing resin. So each creaking can only grow resin once every 5 seconds. And you will have resin grow on the back of this at the very beginning. But then once that completely fills up with resin, then all of the resin will grow here on the front. You could resin proof the back, but I mean it resin proofs itself, so it's okay. Now one thing is that the creaking will kind of fight the water streams. But there's actually a way that we can prevent this. So when you're in survival and you look at the creaking, they will freeze. That's actually why we built this back wall out of glass. Because if you look at the creaking for a second, they will get lined up in a row all super nicely. Now one thing is, you don't want to AFK while staring at this platform. Because while the creaking are frozen, sometimes they kind of sink in the water and don't get hit by the Trident killer. So if we switch back over to creative, we can see that they're all lined up nicely in a row since we froze them in survival. So in survival, if you're just going to AFK this for a night, just go look at them until they're lined up in a row and then go somewhere else where you're not looking at them. You know, just AFK wherever you want to within a close range of this farm. But if you want to AFK this for a long time, AFK it right here on top of the slabs that are on top of these pistons. Just kind of in the middle here. So you can box yourself in with some glass, and the creaking will be able to see you. So they'll aggro you, which will get them all nicely lined up in a row, so that all of the tridents are hitting all of the creaking and they're not fighting the water streams. So doing this will actually improve the rates if you're AFKing for a long time. So just come in here, face away from the spawning platform, and the creaking will all aggro you and get lined up in a row all nice. Now this back wall does need to be glass so that the creaking can see you. But the rest of the blocks could be anything. It could be dirt or whatever solid blocks you want to. So as an example, we can just build these walls out of solid blocks, then spawn proof the top with either slabs or glass. I'll just use glass because I don't have slabs in my hotbar, but slabs would work too. You know, we wouldn't want creaking to spawn up on the top. Then this front part would just be open, so when you're ready to AFK, you would just come in here, face away, place the blocks to keep you safe, and then just sit here and stare at the blocks. Since you can't see the creaking, but they can see you, this will improve the rates because they will get lined up nicely in a row. Last but not least, let's go over some of the things that I learned while designing this farm so that we can all learn together. So the first thing I realized is that these farms are crazy simple. There's basically only two sections to them. There's the spawning platform and damaging area, and then the resin collector, with just like a slow clock connecting the two together. And there's not even like a minimum spawning distance or anything. So the first thing that I tried that I really wanted to work is just a one wide kill chamber, so that the creaking can't fight water streams or any of that stuff. But as you can see, there are some problems to this. You know, the creaking just get pushed through the blocks after they get hit by the pistons if they're touching other creaking, which is very strange. So then I tried to add this like water pushing attachment, you know, because I didn't want to double up on pistons. You know, that seemed extra laggy and expensive. So I just tried water, but this doesn't really work either. They kind of just swim in the water after they're pushed inside the blocks. So that was super sad. So then I started trying corner killers, but I still wanted the kill chamber to only be one block wide. So I tried these weird, like trapdoor corner killers with walls, because the creaking are a full block wide, so they can't fall into like a hole that is not exactly one block wide. And as you can see, this doesn't really work either. They just kind of swim back up the water next to the walls, which finally just led me to, you know, basically what we built in this video, just like a corner killer with a wider kill chamber. First, I tried a 2-wide kill chamber, hoping that they wouldn't fight the water streams quite as much, because the water would be more powerful, which is standard corner killers here in the front. And I was ready to call it good enough, but then the Discord member Anawan was like, well, why don't you make it flat? Do they need to fall into a kill chamber? And it was like, oh, well, duh, I didn't even think about that. And so that's how we ended up with the version that we built today, which is a simple flat spawning platform like so. Now, the size of the spawning platform does actually affect the rates of the spawn. But comparing the double wide platform to the half size, the difference was unnoticeable. The creaking immediately spawned regardless. Now comparing these to like a single row of water, you can really tell the difference. The single rows of water are super duper slow to spawn. Which then brings us to the resin harvester. So at first I was just kind of duplicating what I built for a single creaking version, but then I realized that since these are tiled next to each other now, there's only 2 blocks where resin can grow. You know, 2 faces or 2 sides of the block. And that's not good. We want at least 3. You don't need any more than 3, because unlike spawns, the amount of surface area for resin doesn't matter, but it does need to have at least 3 sides. So that's what led me to this, where it was like, okay, fine, we'll just push a wall back and forth. So each of these slices technically have 4 faces, 3 on the front and 1 on the bottom, and so this helps with overlap and stuff like that. If you want even better rates, you can always just tile these next to each other. You could even connect the spawn platforms together and just build a really long trident killer. The only reason that this design has a limitation of 12 by default is because of the frontmost harvesting pistons. You know, pistons can only push 12 blocks. So you would have to tile the front harvesting section in sections of 12, but the back part, the spawn area and the trident killers, you could just expand that infinitely. As long as the creaking stay within 32 blocks of their heart, and as long as they stay within spawning distance of you, the player, which I'm not exactly sure what that distance is. I did some experimenting, and it doesn't seem like they follow normal spawn distance rules. It seems like they will only spawn if you, the player, are within 20 to 30 blocks. So if someone knows the answer to that question, let me know about it down in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe. Be sure to leave a comment, even if it's just to say hi. I would love to hear from you. Always remember that you are totally awesome, but above all, don't forget to have fun. Bye-bye.